both part of the capitalist class and the armed forces of the capitalist class at the same time in the same institution. So when you're attacking SCAF, you're not just attacking this kind of military defence of the system, you're also attacking something which is right at the core economically of the system as well, which is why it's such a tough battle, which is why they're an entrenched and central part of the ruling operation, and that's why they're determined to try and hang on to as much of the power as they possibly can. So what's happened is the conflict between these two elements in the revolution, and this is what happens in all revolutions. After the moment of the overthrow of the old order, of its most significant political figures, there's a process of political differentiation. Different political forces, different political programs, different class forces, different institutions, different perspectives in the revolution then begin to compete with each other to define what the revolution is really about. And some of those forces want to stop the revolution almost as soon as it started. And that's what quite a large section of the people around SCAF and around the Muslim Brotherhood want to do. They're saying, okay, that's enough. We've got rid of Mubarak, we are going to have some form of democracy, and that's it. You know, go home. Stop protesting, stop striking, stop carrying on about a fast transition to democracy. You've had enough, go home. That's been really the message of the SCAF government all the way through the year, and very often it's been echoed by the Muslim Brotherhood. Not always, but very often it's been echoed by the Muslim Brotherhood as well. The argument has been repeatedly, again and again, that Egypt is not to hear. That these people in the square, they're a minority, they don't represent the whole of Egyptian society, there are very, very many people who have faith in the armed forces, they're causing trouble, they're pushing the economy to a disaster, we've had enough of the lack of security, it's got to stop. That's been the repeated message again and again from the government, from the state TV, on and on and on all year. And not without effect. Not without some effect either, and the ability of the military to sometimes brutally suppress demonstrations, the Women's Day demonstration on the 8th of March, the COP demonstration outside Maspero, again and again, often in Tahrir itself, again and again to do that is because there's some truth to it. A revolution affects the broadest mass of the population differentially. Not everybody is radicalised at the same speed. Not everybody draws the same conclusions at the same time. There are some people who are supporters of the regime, just like there's a third of the working class in this country that always votes Tory. Don't ask me why, but it does. Who are never convinced of a progressive political agenda. And the reactionary forces in the society rest on that base. And in Egyptian society, there's a lot of it. There's 28% of the population are still working on the land. In Egypt. There's 2% in this country. It's a different, and that gives a different weight to the way in which these messages are received. So what happened really in the 25th of January this year was a clash between these two perspectives. It was a clash between the forces represented by Tahrir, who said the revolution is not complete, the military are behaving just like Mubarak, that it's unacceptable that they deploy force against the protesters in this way, that we want a quick set of elections, that we want power given to elected representatives, that we want the army completely out of politics, and very many of them want a greater social transformation beyond that, that deals not just with political problems, with civil liberties, with the right to a democratic society, but dealing with social and economic questions as well. And that will always going to be the case. If you have a revolution in a society where half the population exists on $2 a day, it is never going to be the case that that revolution will be over until those people feel there's been a change not only that they can vote, but that they can live. There's some theories, I'm very committed to the idea that people should have democratic freedom, should be able to vote, should have the freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, and so forth and so on. I'm also quite committed to the idea that people have the right to live in a decent society, to eat 3 meals a day, not to see their children starve, not to see their children brought up illiterate. These are things which will only be addressed if there's an economic transformation in the society as well as a political transformation in the society. And it's those things which are now being brought to the fore. It's that It's the conflict between those who want to stop the revolution now and that the old business of economic inequality, of class domination, of exploitation, of lack of democracy, of lack of freedom of speech, of an inability to effectively organise, that will all continue. That's what SCAF represents. That's what the veneer of a democracy looks like. And those people are still fighting for a much more fundamental change, either much more fundamental politically or much more fundamental both politically and economically. And I think the great thing about the last few days is that although for very considerable numbers of days and weeks during the year, it looked as if SCAF was able to demoralise, attack and demobilise people as if it could win some of those arguments. Actually, what the 25th showed is that that project came unstuck, came badly unstuck, because what SCAF wanted out of the anniversary of the revolution was to say, it's over. We're celebrating something completed, that was done last year and which is now over. I mean, they had sort of elaborate plans to have balloons released with presents in them, to have sort of army marches, to have firework displays. To put it simply, they wanted to kind of jubilee-ise, which we'll experience later in the year, but they wanted to make it into an official state celebration of something that was in the past. And what everybody on the other side wanted was to make it a statement of a continuing revolution, a reaffirmation of revolutionary energy. And two things would decide that. One, the scale of the protests on the day, and the other, the political character of the protests on the day. So SCAF lost this battle on two fronts. Firstly, the demonstrations were absolutely huge and had nothing of the official sort of jubilee-type character of a state-led celebration about them whatsoever. They lost out because of the scale of the mobilisation, which was on the scale of the 18 days, and they lost out because the overwhelming character of the demonstration, every placard, every chant, every march, especially the marches that came in from the local areas, dominated by the demand that SCAF be removed. You know, the placards in Tahrir Square that I've got the photographs of the Tantawi with his hands covered in blood, of a huge group just marched past me just chanting repeatedly, Tantawi is the son of a dog, for hours, hours and hours. The whole sort of repetition of the kind of iconography of the revolution. I mean, there were always the huge flags, but there is one picture which, if people haven't found it on the internet, please do find it, of simply what must go into the Guinness Book of Records as the largest flag in the world ever, which you can see stretching from one of the buildings above Tahrir, right across the whole width of Tahrir, and out across the Kasr-e-Nil Bridge. You can't actually see the back of the flag, never mind out the back of the crowd that's holding it up. So I think they've suffered a huge defeat, and the fact that the demonstrations have been going on today, again with huge marches from the localities, is very important. The Brotherhood were not well received in the square today. People shouting at them and throwing shoes at them. That's the payback for supporting SCAF. That's the message to the Brotherhood that you did the wrong thing. You supported the wrong people, and the corner turned on the 25th, and that message, I think, is now echoing out. But one thing I'll say about the future is this. It is a process, I think that's right. But there is something important missing in the Egyptian revolution, which I think the revolution has to address. Because it isn't always going to be prey to the tactic which SCAF used this year, i.e. of trying to drive a wedge between the revolutionaries and the rest of Egyptian society. The revolution has to develop an institution which can represent the revolutionary forces, rather than simply confronting each crisis that SCAF throws at it by returning to the square. You know, it's kind of mechanism like the French Revolution, or the Great Journée, the days in the French Revolution when the whole crowd would turn out and confront the conservative and reactionary forces in the society. But most revolutions develop an institution which represents the revolution itself, in which all the different forces in the revolution are all represented, and which mobilises it. In the English Revolution in the 17th century, the New Model Army and the London crowd became that institution. In the French Revolution, the National Assembly was the institution which represented the revolution against the monarchy and the aristocrats. In the Russian Revolution, it was the workers' councils which did that. the Egyptian revolution hasn't developed an institution. There are popular councils locally, but if you can imagine a kind of national popular council that pulled together all those forces, then it wouldn't just be that the government has its institutions and its ability to mobilise forces and its ability to mobilise its media. It would be that there was a countervailing power which organised the forces of the revolution. They're organised in a kind of ad hoc way among the very many different committees at the moment, and that's, I believe, is a weakness which I think is now beginning to be addressed, sometimes by the popular committees, sometimes inside the trade unions. But what it really needs is an institution which can say to the government, we represent the forces of the revolution, and not only that, we've reached out beyond the activists of Tahrir. I mean, the revolutionary minority is huge, it's millions of people, but it is a minority in a society of 80 million people. What you need is a bridge between the revolutionaries and the whole society, which can stop the armed forces trying to drive a wedge between the revolutionaries and the rest of the society. And I think it's that question which is now being raised by the success, really, of the anniversary demonstrations, and which I think we'll all be watching and participating in the discussions as the revolution unfolds in the next year.